Okay, today we're going to make an animation. We're going to start with our 1T pose, which we've talked about in previous tutorials. And as you can see here, I've brought up my chair prop that I've saved from a previous video. Now, sits are really easy. Generally speaking, you only have 30 seconds for an animation, so we want to keep the movement down to a minimum. Every time there's a movement, you're going to see a repeat because it's looped back, and repeats tend to be boring. So we don't want to make a whole lot of them. Now, as you can see here, I'm moving limbs in unison just to get the basic position. And I'm going to move our young lady, back. There we go. And down into position over this chair. Now, as you can see here, it's set up basically as a very generic chair. Furniture makers are going to get mad at you if you make it too specific because they can't fit it to their furniture. So generally speaking, we want to make it very generic. What we're going to do is move our arms out a little bit. Let's rotate them some. And as we've talked about in previous videos, you can move both hands or both matching sections of a limb in unison by hitting Shift and then double clicking on that item. Now we've got a general sit position. Notice here that I've kept the arms high. You're better off keeping them high than you are by setting them down in. If you set them too close, the furniture maker is going to get a little frustrated. Also, what I've decided to do with this one is to unlock the neck and the head in frame 2 so that when you upload it, after you upload it and put it in the furniture, the head will move randomly with the mouse movements or just random drifting. Kind of gives it a little more realism. So, we've got our basic position. And since this would be a lady's sit, I think it might be a good idea for her to cross her legs. We'll move that one over just a bit. Bring this one up higher. Now, you're going to see that it's overlapping and kind of smushed into each other. There's going to need to be a little bit of that because in real life the flesh gives, and in virtual reality you don't see that happen. So we're going to just make it appear that it's happening. And we want to rotate that leg out a little bit. There we go. And now she's got her leg crossed. And let's not make her so stiff. So if we want to relax her a little bit, kind of a good idea to drop the foot down a little. Now keep in mind that most women in virtual worlds, when they wear a shoe, especially high heels, they wear a prim foot that accompanies that shoe. Keep in mind that those prim feet are pushed down like so to position the foot like it would be in a high heel. Now if you do this with the foot in the animation, Basically, their foot when they sit, comes out looking like it's folded. Looks completely ridiculous. So, we want to get a more natural hang and not point that toe too far down. So that's our basic sit. She's got her legs crossed and she's in a general position for a decent chair. Now keep in mind that we talked about this before. We only have 30 seconds for an animation. That's all you get. So any movement you make is going to be repeated every 30 seconds. So let's decide on our movement. For myself, I think we're going to flip her hair a little bit. So we rotate her hand. I came out 1.5 seconds from the very beginning. 30 frames. At 20 frames per second, that's 1.5 seconds. What we're going to do is rotate her arm up so that it looks like she's flipping her hair. Now keep in mind that most of the time when the hand is supposed to be close to the head, it actually needs to be touching it. Or quite literally into the head. With as long as most women make their arms in these virtual worlds, that's going to happen. So, we've got her hand up, what will be next to her head. And maybe we can back that off just a little bit. There we go. That's pretty good. Now that'll look like it's in her hair, but not necessarily in her head. And one thing you notice when people move one part of their body like that drastically, other parts of their body tend to follow. So we'll shove her over a little bit that way on the top, and a little bit. Ooh, haha, that didn't work out so good. That happens sometimes, folks. And we'll move her over just 3 degrees right there on the rotation. Now keep in mind that we've moved her upper 3 degrees to the rotation and her midsection 3 degrees. So we need to bring her arm out 6 degrees. There's 5. Whoops. A 2 will make it 6 degrees. Now if we watch this hand, let's cross our fingers, it should stay in a general position. Maybe not so much. So we need to adjust that a little bit. What's the best way to do that? Make sure that we hold it in a one right position with a prop. So I brought in a prop. And we're gonna put this right where her hand is. Generally, you can go 4 wide. By 4 for a hand to get a good idea of where it should be. See how I don't cover the hand, but I generally make it. I get a good general position on it. Now I see that it should be, there's our middle finger, so we can follow that. Hey, looky there. Okay, really good way to do that is to move it over in the shoulder, because it moves it very evenly. Now it's sticking out a bit far, so we move this down a bit, move her forearm a bit, and hopefully stays in the same general place. Here we go. Okay, there is a little movement, but that's not bad. It's hardly going to be noticeable once you get it into World. If you spend, keep in mind, the more time you spend on these very simple animations, you're going to reach a point where you're wasting time. So keep it simple on simple animations, and when you get into difficult animations, pay very close attention. Spend your time on them. I copied and pasted. So now I have a half-second movement of the arm up to the side of the head. Now this is generally a pretty quick movement when they flip their hair. Now we don't want to just do that and then roll back into position. She is going to flip her hair. So we move out, like so. See how she does that flip? Now keep in mind that I'm doing only a couple of keyframes here. There's no need to do a keyframe every frame. Let the program work for you and with you. Don't try to over control it. That's where we get our jerks. There we go. Now we know we want to be back in that position. And it should take about half a second to get back down there. Paste. Now we have our one single movement that we're going to have every 30 seconds. Boom, she flips her hair and brings her arm back down. All set. Now, one of the things that tends to happen is if you have a long period of time where there is no movement, you get drifting, and that's not something we enjoy. So what we're going to do is, as always, we start with, we copy and paste all the way at the end, so that when it loops back around, we're not going to have a jerk there either. Now, let's take our position at 2 seconds past our last position. We'll copy and paste, and you see there's no movement in here. And what we want to do is nice leisurely lift of her leg. Now keep in mind, when she lifts her shin, her knee is going to tend to drop a little. And we're going to raise her toe a bit. Now if we take the beginning of that movement, copy it, now see we went 1, 2 seconds. Let's go 1, 2 seconds, 40 frames, 20 frames per second. It's 2 seconds. We're going to bring it back down. So basically what we've got here is it takes her 2 seconds to bring her foot out, and then 2 seconds back in. Now if you want to give it a little more realism, her leg's probably going to drop a little faster than it went up. So we back that off by half a second, and now it'll go up faster, or it'll go down faster than it went up. We'll see that here. She moves it up nice and slow and then brings it down. Now let's take that a little further and let's bring it up to somewhat arbitrary, but in these simple ones it doesn't matter. Copy, paste, and what we can do is go all the way back here to where her leg is up Copy that and bring it. There's 1 second, 20 frames, 2 seconds, 40 frames. Paste. Come back here, grab that original position, copy. Let's say we let our leg down a little slower this time. So there's 20, which is 1 second, 40, which is 2 seconds. Paste, and it's back in the original position. So now what we've done is we created a big movement here and small movements here, just so she still looks alive. Now keep in mind that her head will move randomly, and when you move your mouse on the screen while you're in world, her head will turn in the direction of your mouse. Now let's see, we've got 430 frames, or frame 430 to frame 600 is 270 frames. Back that up. $170 frames, and I'm okay with that. So what we can do is take that middle movement, let's do it a little bit different here. We're going to take a less dramatic movement, copy that, and we'll paste it just so we remember where we copied from. We're going to bring that to somewhere around the middle of that 170 frames. Paste it. And just for my own peace of mind, I usually copy that first frame, copy, and come down here, and 10 frames before the end, paste it, and then at the very end I paste it again, just so I've got a little time before that loop and before that's all changed. Let's double check to make sure that we're at 20 frames per second. We'll bring it all the way back and let's take a look at it. Nice slow movement, and her leg moves back a little bit faster. And as I've said before, we have her head moving around in this big blank spot whenever you choose to move her head. Especially if you want to look at a friend that's sitting on your right, you move the mouse to your right. If you want to look at one on your left, you move your mouse to the left. And see, we've got a nice slow movement there. And see, as we loop back around, there was no jerk to it. And this looks pretty good for just a generic sit that we can use pretty much anywhere. Let's stop it. Come up here, save as, and I'm gonna tell you, every time we have a tutorial, always save with the .bvh. If you just leave it off and leave it blank on what type of animation you're saving, you're going to get an AVM by default, and you won't be able to find it when you want to upload it. Let's go to female AO. We're going to save as generic sit.bvh. And that brings us to a close.